Finally, in general terms, and perhaps most importantly, I heard the Chief Executive of Rape Crisis Scotland say this yesterday: I don't see how it's possible to have a rapist within a female prison. And so let me be very clear. I agree with that statement. And bearing in mind what I've just said about the importance of individualised risk assessment as a general principle and presumption, I think that statement is correct. Turning now to specifics, in the case that has been in the media in recent days, that risk assessment is underway. As in all cases, the Scottish Prison Service won't wait until an assessment is completed if they think action is required more quickly. Now, it would not be appropriate for me, in respect of any prisoner, to give details of where they are being incarcerated. But given the understandable public and parliamentary concern in this case, I can confirm to Parliament that this prisoner will not be incarcerated at Cornton Vale Women's Prison. And I hope that provides assurance to the public, Presiding Officer, not least to the victims in this particular case.
Tony, we think that she was actually remanded at Cornton Vale after the conviction, but the sentence, of course, and where to serve that sentence yet to be decided. But Nicola Sturgeon making this intervention pretty early on today.
Yes, well, certainly Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, wasted absolutely no time in quizzing Nicola Sturgeon about it. He asked Nicola Sturgeon, would this be okay if for any rapist to go into a women's prison? You know, Nicola Sturgeon, after some back and forth with Mr Ross, she made it clear that this was, as you say, not going to be a permanent solution. But that doesn't stop the amount of public outcry that she has faced in the last few days. And I'm sure many will suddenly breathe a sigh of relief that she has now nearly broke that silence. I believe we've got some videos, so let's hear what she has to say.
It would not be appropriate for me, in respect of any prisoner, to give details of where they are being incarcerated. But given the understandable public and parliamentary concern in this case, I can confirm to Parliament that this prisoner will not be incarcerated at Cornton Vale Women's Prison. And I hope that provides assurance to the public, Presiding Officer, not least to the victims in this particular case.
Well, Tony, of course, we don't know if she's actually been removed from that prison as yet, and the sentencing won't happen until next month. I guess the whole question now of where that sentence will be served.
Indeed, you know, and I think the timing of this couldn't really come at a worse time, straight off the foot of last week's story about the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. And what we're actually seeing now is the manifestation of one of the biggest oppositions to that bill, the safety of women in single-sex spaces. So Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Prison Service has yet to announce where Isla will be held, but what we do know for sure is that it's not going to be here at Cornton Vale.
Has sanity finally prevailed, or is this just still a very worrying situation?
Well, sort of. But it's still worrying because this ridiculous policy is still in place. The Scottish Prison Service policy was written really by lobbyists, and it is based on self-ID. And there is a bit of a presumption there that somebody's declared or preferred gender is the thing that prison officers should be looking at. And it causes problems not only when male prisoners are moved into the women's estate, and there are male prisoners in the women's estate, including at least 2 murderers, but it also causes problems for those when those male prisoners have been held in the men's estate. I think some of the practices may have changed, but the policy actually said that if a male prisoner had self-declared themselves to be a woman, then they could demand that intimate searches were carried out by female prison officers. And that caused trouble in the case of one, several.
Look, absolutely. I mean, it's another layer to it. And yesterday I was very focused on the other inmates, the female inmates. Clearly, you've just raised an issue there about female members of staff, which I must say I hadn't originally thought of. But last night, I was thinking to myself about this story, and I thought, you know what? Yesterday, I didn't actually ask about the victims, and that was an oversight. So how do you think that the female victims who were raped by this man must be feeling, knowing that he essentially put a wig on and bought a pink handbag and was very nearly sent in, well, has been sent into, but probably won't be staying there, into a women's prison?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have brought up time and again this idea of if you are a traumatised victim, and not only do you have the indignity and the fear of going into a court and the questions you might be asked, but you're listening to the court describing the person who raped you as a woman and talking about her penis and to cap it all off, I think in this case, which was absolutely abhorrent, the defence tried to spin this line that this was another vulnerable woman because, and solely because, he claimed he was transitioning. So they were using this idea of transgender status, which is one that is pushed constantly by Sturgeon and others, that trans people are vulnerable and marginalised. So they were picking up on that and saying, well, because this is a trans person, automatically, therefore, he is vulnerable and marginalised and therefore couldn't have committed this crime. And of course, Sturgeon and Robertson have stood up in Parliament and said, nobody would do this, this would never happen. Well, this has happened. So they either need to decide, is this a violent predatory man who exploited a loophole within a self-ID system, which is what they have in the prison service, or this is a genuine vulnerable trans person, but they can't have it both ways.
No, they can't have it both ways. And you hit on a really interesting point there, which is if the trans community keeps being bracketed as an incredibly vulnerable, marginalised community. And I would argue the tone of the way that members of the trans community are often described when it comes to certain politicians puts them in the same class, wrongly, as people with, say, a disability or other marginalised groups. And therefore means that they can go and stand in a court, like you just highlighted there, Susan, and try to mask the fact that they are a double rapist and seek some sympathy by virtue of being now part of a, quote, marginalised community. I would argue, Susan, that there was nothing particularly vulnerable about this man when he was raping two women.
No, and the testimony the victims gave, obviously, was that he was using his superior physical strength, which, again, is something where we keep being told, no, there's no difference. But obviously he used his advantages as a man to rape two women. And for people to be dancing around and talking about this person as though they're a woman is really sickening. And as you said, must be absolutely devastating for the victims.
I want to ask, when you're campaigning or having discussions like these up in Scotland, when you're attending things like votes in Holyrood or wherever, there's always a lot of demonstrations on either side. Do you feel as though you're in the minority now with your views?
No, and certainly not in Scotland. I mean, the latest polls show that an overwhelming number of people are against this bill, and an overwhelming number of people who would support the SNP are against this bill. So it's been really interesting because it's probably the first time, it is the first time that the UK government have used a Section 35. And the reaction has been interesting from all quarters, because you would naturally expect some of the people who are SNP supporters to think this was Westminster interference. But in fact, the overwhelming response has been, thank goodness that this has